Hey Tana, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Holly?
Pretty good. You were just telling me about your weekend adventure at a concert. It's like a million degrees here, so that seems like a could have been an uncomfortable proposition. It was not indoors.
It was hot and there was a bazillion people. I went to the Morgan Wallen concert, and this is the second time I've seen him. I saw him when he was in Milwaukee at American Family Field. And Camp Randall is just not able to support that amount of people, I think is that's the
Yeah.
vibe. My husband was working the event and he was in like his full like gear and he is working it tonight. There's another show tonight. And he said that he went to put his stuff on and it was the feeling of putting on a wet swimsuit, but it's from your sweat. So he's like,
Hmm.
this is disgusting. Like, ew. Yeah, it was really hot and I was feeling very vigilant. It's like my head's on a swivel. But overall, it was fun.
Good. Good.
Yeah. You spent your day at a race. So,
We were at a race. We had some teammates racing, a little local race. It was super fun. It was a good day, but to your point, the heat, we're in a bit of a heat wave after it being
so
winter
hot.
here forever. Now it's like a million degrees and so
So
another
hot.
really hot race. Last weekend we raced and it was really hot last weekend. This time the water was so warm that people were getting out and water was the same temperature as the air. Like the water was 85 degrees. So you can't even cool down at all. So that's
Oh, yuck. And the
yeah.
humidity is just like there's just no relief. Like even when
No.
a breeze comes through, it's hot.
Yes. Every time there's
Oh,
like wind and it's hot, I went running with someone last week and we talked about this. We're like, yeah, it feels like a hair dryer. Like it is
oh,
like a hair dryer blowing on you just like constantly because it's so warm.
it's a very accurate depiction.
So, I mean, maybe we should get into to the Enneagram since this is a
We should probably get
podcast
into
about the
it.
Enneagram,
We should
well,
probably get into it.
the weekend stuff. But recording on a Sunday night, it is kind of nice to just like unpack the weekend. So, just as a reminder, this is Tana and I's podcast called the Enneagram Adventure. Tana and I are both IEQ 9 certified coaches with that tool for the Enneagram. We love the Enneagram. It's been a huge development tool for us personally, professionally. We use it to coach others. Yeah. So we love it. So we want to share it with you. So hopefully, anybody who's listening, if you're new here, you could back up a few episodes if you want to get the full scope of all 9 types. But otherwise, if you're jumping in with us now, hopefully you get something out of it. And yeah, anything I missed, Tana?
No, other than comment, message us, DM us if anything was particularly thought provoking, triggering, eye opening, any of those things. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. We have a couple folks who are interested in being guests on the pod. So we're trying to work out the logistics of what that's going to look like. So we haven't forgotten you. We are working out how to make that a reality.
Yep. Yep.
So today's topic is maybe going to feel a little heavy to some as we get into it, but we're going to talk about what happens when your Enneagram type fails. What happens when this kind of strategy you've built for yourself stops working?
Yeah. Not to be confused with like when you have a failure, like as your number, not to be confused, but when the mechanisms that you've built within your number that support your core motivation are not working anymore, then what?
Yeah. The idea in the failure is that, or the idea in the Enneagram, right? If we go back to the beginning, how it's created, and we talk about early childhood development, every person who has kids probably is watching this happen in real time. But there's a window of time. We've talked multiple times on the podcast, but I'm just going to go through it really quick again for anybody who's new. And that is from 0 to 8. A kid is developing through that time. And one of the things they're doing is they're testing strategies of how they get taken care of in their family, like what works and what doesn't. When I do this, do I get fed? If I do this, do I get picked up? Do I get loved? Do I get attention? All of these things, but they're testing out different ideas. And we've referenced it in the past, right? With your kids, like you're watching them sort of be like, ooh, what about this? What about this? And that is unconscious for kids, but that's what's happening as they're developing. And around the age of 7, 8, kind of their personality is solidified and they have settled on a strategy that they believe will work in their family. So the idea is that that's what becomes your Enneagram type. It's of your personality. And sometimes it's helpful for people to think about it as a strategy. Like you've developed these things as coping mechanisms for your life. And they can be, as you get older and older, they can become walls or masks or defenses. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
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 But so the idea behind that then is like your type strategy that you've developed, what happens when it
Yeah.
doesn't work anymore.
I think like to the point of testing, it's if you've ever known a kid that's just like starting to figure out how to feed themselves in a high chair, and like every kid goes through this stage where they like drop the cup on the floor. Like they push the cup off onto the floor and then they're like, now what happens? They're just learning. They're literally thinking about, oh, I'm going to kick this off. Oh, it makes a noise when it hits the floor. And then
Yeah.
my mom or my dad or my whoever comes and picks it up. And now I'm going to do it again to see if they do the same thing. Like that's just a really dumbed down version of them trying things on, and that it's subconscious because they don't know why they're doing it. They're just trying to learn the world around them. So that's how we develop that motivation over time. One thing I will say is it takes some people longer than others, but another way to think about this podcast topic is like when you get sick of your own shit a little bit, right? Or when that same shit doesn't work anymore.
I was thinking about it for me. Maybe we start with you and I first. But I was thinking about it, for a 5. A 5 builds the personality is built around like this pursuit of understanding, this pursuit of knowledge. And when that doesn't work, when like the knowing the thing doesn't get me what I want it to get me, or being quiet. That's like a big one, that being quiet and reserved and whatever doesn't actually build the thing that I'm hoping it will build. Then what? And I think this is where this is different than stress line. This starts
Yeah.
to be, it can be, well, really lonely, for example. It could be depression. It starts to be maybe the darker side of emotion. I don't know if you would agree with that and how it would show up for you, but it's like you've tried all these things that were working for you and now they're not working. And why aren't they working? And it can get really self-critical. Well, I don't, like, I'm doing all that I can. So why is everything that I'm doing working? And that's just like all those protection mechanisms, like getting all twisted up. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it can be like that darker side of emotion, but it feels really confusing. The initial feeling is confusion, where I end up having to sit and like really think about, okay, like, why isn't this working? And is it for real not going to work? Because if it's not, then I don't know what to do. And that's when the darker side comes up. So for me, that could look like me trying to be helpful for everyone in my life and just like getting super burned out. And then me not realizing that that's not working. So I just keep going until I hit a point where, kind of at this point, almost right now, where what's the best way to describe this? It's almost like I go into overdrive first on the thing. So I try to anticipate other people's needs. I try to insert myself in places where I don't need to be inserted. I try to be overly helpful, overly thoughtful. And then I get to a point where I'm like, God, I am like so tired and so burned out. And I'll continue to try to fill my cup by like doing those same things, but I just deplete myself more and more and more and more and more. And then I wonder why I'm so tired. I wonder why I'm so impatient. And then it's like the immediate is like, well, I must not be like aligned with myself, right? So then I sometimes take that as I need to continue doing things for other people. When I can think of a few examples in my life where that happened for an extended period of time, and what actually broke it, like, from that pattern was doing something that I would never even have considered doing before. Like, a really interesting time with my parents, as an example, was when I got to a certain age. My parents didn't really, like, socialize. They didn't really like, they kind of pretended like the other one didn't exist when they were in the same vicinity as one another. And then it got to a point with them where I had this conversation where I was like, I am done with that. I'm done. And if you've listened to any of our other episodes, my relationship with authority is very complicated. Thanks. For me to like just confront that with a kind of like an ultimatum. Like, if that's going to happen, then this is going to happen. Then it immediately shifted. Immediately. And the amount of stress that I used to feel leading up to situations, or like, do I invite this person? Then I feel like I can't, or shouldn't I? It was way too much to try to navigate. So for best case scenario for me, it was then the result was, oh, gotcha, Gucci, you're right, my bad. It could have gone the other way, which I was fully prepared for, but never in my normal practice of being a 2 would it come naturally to have a very direct, logical, non-emotive discussion of like, if this, then that.
Yeah. I'm thinking a little bit in terms of this. If every type was built in you to keep you safe, whatever your type is. And I think about it for you as a 2. So you talked about it, you're giving and giving and giving. It's not working. What does that do to self image or your self worth,
Oh,
right? When it's not working.
yeah. I mean, it it's dark. It gets really dark. It gets like, I don't know what I'm doing. I am not a good friend. I'm not a good spouse. I'm inconsistent. I'm like, this is all conversation that happens. And then I get to the point where it's almost like a version of depression where I'm not doing my regular routine in the morning and I get like so far off track. It feels awful when it gets to that point. It's almost like it actually, what ends up happening is I feel like I want like a good cry. Like, I just want to like have a good cry, but I can't. Like, I'm so depleted that I can't. I thought about it today. I was like, God, it would feel good to just like,
You need to have like a moment.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was like, I can't even cry. And it, I think that's one of my signs, right? Like, some of this work is the signs that come out of those really dark things. And I'm getting better about seeing before it gets to that point. I would say right now, is an example of where I am at with that point, where I feel like I'm just all over the place and I make myself feel really shitty about it.
Well, that starts to open a couple of questions for me because I think it's similar. Obviously, it's in the fiveness. It's not the same as like giving and giving and giving, but there is an element that more so happens. It's like the opposite almost that happens for the five. Fives are withdrawing numbers, and as children, withdrawing numbers got something out of that. They got safety out of the withdrawing. I'm unseen, therefore I am safe, right? If I'm quiet and nobody notices me, I'm safe. But what happens for me as an adult in that is, so there's the knowing, I can't know enough. There's when that doesn't work. But then there's when like the quiet reserved doesn't work. Particularly if you think about like the need for connection. Like I think
Sure.
about times in my life where I wanted to, you know, have a deeper friendship with someone or, you know, work on something with someone. Maybe there's a conflict that hasn't been resolved for whatever reason. Well, the withdrawing thing isn't going to work to like connect people more. Does that make sense? Like nobody, if I withdraw, nobody knows why I'm doing that. They can make all kinds of assumptions about it, but they're not going to. A lot of times I find that people don't reach out to me a lot or don't send a lot of messages about things. And I think some of it is in the withdrawing tendency. And if we remember back to the tri-type episode, in my tri-type, I'm all three withdrawing numbers, which is just fucking fantastic. So, like, and I want to hear from people. I want to be included, but sometimes because I don't respond with lengthy messages. You know what I mean? I think people are like, oh, she doesn't want to be bothered. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's making sense, but that is a place where there can be like failure in the type. The thing that worked until I was, you know, into high school age that kept me safe in my family doesn't work as an adult. Like you don't build friendships like that. You don't build relationships like that. And to your point, it can get really dark and it can be this like questioning everything. And I think that's another place where the type 5 can fail, right? Is the
Mm-hmm.
question just this like constantly questioning everything. Oh, well, this, and then connecting dots, right? So like, oh, well, this must mean this person doesn't like me or this person is upset with me or this whatever the story is that you decide to tell. So to the inner critic.
That's interesting. How I don't know how you feel about this, but how I feel sometimes is, don't you wish that you had someone that could just like read your mind and know, like, I'm not trying to like make you feel like I don't care or make you, and be able to hold the space for you, because candidly, that's a little bit how I feel about, even when we record. It's like this release for me of like just having a judgment-free zone discussion with one of my closest friends that I know doesn't judge me for anything. You know what I mean? Like there's this
Right.
moment of there's nothing attached to it. And I think I would just tell people who are listening, like, if you don't have a friend that you can be like, hey, because I've noticed you like kind of withdrawing, and you're right that my tendency is to be like, I don't want to bother, but like for me being a two, it's more like I am a lot. I am a burden right now. I don't want, so it that's the way that it shows up. But don't you wish you could have just like somebody that just crawls in your brain and they're like, oh, she needs this right now from me.
Yes. I mean, I think that's ideal. And I will say that's one thing. It is interesting in the Enneagram, and as you and I have built our relationship very much through the lens of this work, there are certain things that don't, I'm not surprised. it's not that I can read your mind or that I think you can read my mind, but I'm not surprised by things because we talk about it so openly when we do talk about like how things are feeling or whatever. And also because knowing the Enneagram, I think it just helps with that. But I would say to all of my two friends, and I know there are a few of them, at least three besides you, that are regular listeners of this podcast. To my two friends, I would just say I never feel like you're too much. And and if there's a moment where I need a break, I will take it. So I don't want any of my two friends to be like, "Oh, I'm too much." The difficult thing in the 5 space is it's it is not dissimilar this from what you just said about 2s. I also don't want to be a burden, and so I have a very hard time asking for what I need. And I think that's like this dangerous, dangerous thing in the withdrawing numbers. If you don't ask, most people don't know the Enneagram like the way you and I do or talk to each other about it on a regular basis. So the dangerous thing becomes is the five in me that's always waiting for the invitation, but then is going to turn it down like 90% of the time. Right? But that's like that. It's dangerous in building of relationships or having people understand you or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else who's listening, but
I think it does. I guess, can you think of an example where when the 5 when the 5 energy that you've been using isn't working, and what it can look like from a, like, very specific example perspective, and then, like, what have you done before that has kind of helped flip that on its head?
well, if when it's not, it very much depends on the moment. I do have a few people that I can reach out to. So if I'm finding myself drawing a lot, there are a few people I can just sort of ping into and be like, hey, I just like need to connect with somebody. Like I just need to like just like is anybody out there?
Yeah,
Like, right?
yeah.
So there's that. And so I have that when it's that bad. But I think even for me to get out of it, I end up doing solo things. I can, when I find myself caught in overthinking, I will go do something really physical. I'll go for a run. I'll go for a bike, or I'll just like, we have a big garden here. I'll go out to the garden, whatever. I just have to like sort of change the energy of the space. And sometimes that will help. But that doesn't, again, it doesn't, I don't know. That's maybe like a lean into that 8 line when we've talked about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not dissimilar from when, I mean, like, this is a very creative thing. So leaning into my 4, doing something creative that is releasing some of that tension from a growth line perspective.
I also think sometimes it's in discomfort too. When you're in this like dark space, your type has failed you. Your strategy that you use and have used over and over and over and has just become like a well-worn groove that like you just know is just predictable for you, right? And it's typically predictable for everyone around you as well. Like when that's not working, it is an uncomfortable thing, and that often is the best way out. So if it feels really uncomfortable for me to be like, oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example. Go to dinner with somebody we don't normally go to dinner with, or invite somebody to something. Sometimes that can be really uncomfortable. And that's like oversimplifying it. Like I don't have like the best example, but it's like getting out of it, finding the way out of it it's that again, it's that the only way is through. So how do you like lean into the discomfort rather than continuing to pull away? Because the pulling away is also uncomfortable. It's just familiar.
Yeah, that's the difference. the familiarity is the difference, because if you think about, 8 would be the other one that is closest to me and my household. So I'll talk a little bit about that one and what it could look like. But, you know, for an 8, when I kind of liken it sometimes to like all of that angry energy that can come from an 8 that's protecting them. It's almost like when you let your kid like have the biggest tantrum and like lose their mind, and it's like the moment where they get tired and then they truly start crying and like are able to kind of tell you what's going on, right?
Mhm.
That's exactly how I feel about it, except for my husband, it's more of like an internal anger. I can pick up on the energy from him very quickly when it's like heightened, but it almost is like I'll know when he's had a phone call like with one of his best friends and just kind of like bleh, and just let it out. And it's immediately better.
Yeah.
Immediately. But it's that you're then through that angry part and you're identifying that there's another emotion attached to something. And that can be very uncomfortable, especially for an 8 when they're so guarded and so careful about who they let see that vulnerable side of them. So it it's a little bit of that like moment of just let it go, just let it fall. So that's how I would say for an 8 it looks like, where it's that kicking, screaming tantrum on the floor, both arms, both legs. Any parent listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. That's the one where you're like, I'm either going to be super embarrassed and grind this out in public, or this kid's going over my shoulder and we are getting the hell out of here. Like, it's,
Yeah.
it's one of
I
those.
just let
It's
them
one of
like,
those.
yeah. I
Oh,
think,
actually, that's really funny because my husband's parents tell a story about him at Legoland at Mall of
oh
America
no. Yeah.
doing that, and they actually have a picture of it.
Poor kid. Oh man, to think to take a picture. Also, that would have been in the era pre-digital camera. So they took a picture with film.
Film. Like,
Yeah.
doop, there he is, laying on the floor of Mall of America, losing his mind. That's hilarious. I didn't mean for that to connect, but it did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Pre-cell phone too. Man, yeah. Okay. I actually feel a little bad for him right now. Like, oh man.
Poor guy. Poor
Yeah.
guy.
Oh man.
Well, what would
I
it look
don't
like for a 9?
I was gonna say there are a lot of nines. I think well, it's a withdrawing. Nines are another withdrawing number. Sometimes I think actually
It's real
for
quiet in your house.
yeah, it gets real quiet, very quiet. But it's sort of when the strategies for keeping the peace aren't working for the nine. I'd be curious for other nines if it's similar for them. But when it doesn't work, Aaron actually gets, this is the stress line comes through him. He gets anxious about whatever.
Right.
And it sometimes, I talk about like there's like physical, like, or things that I notice, but it can be in the moment when it's like, oh, this isn't working. I can't solve this. Where, he tries to like solve it in the moment. We had a friend, this was years and years ago, that we ended up in a situation with where I felt like we were getting taken advantage of. This was back when I trained horses. And I got pretty angry about it. And kind of I wasn't super nice to this person about the situation. I was very overly direct. You could probably say it was like the more negative 8 sort of thing coming through where it was very direct. And then you can couple that with like the 5 logic bully where I was just not going to let this person like there was no excuse they were going to give to me that was going to make the situation okay,
Mhm.
at least in my mind. And the it was an argument. The argument like happened in front of Aaron, and he like went into this like try to solve it situation, like try to keep the peace in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't gonna work, right? Like it just
Yeah.
and then so it's like that first, and then it becomes this sort of like panicky anxiety, where it's like, yeah,
That sounds very uncomfortable. Like that panicky anxiety feeling. That's the worst.
yeah.
That's the
It doesn't
worst.
happen very often anymore, but I think, I think about that instance now. I think when there's like situations, and since we're both withdrawing numbers now, rather than ever letting it get to that point, we cut it off before, you know what I mean? You set a new
Yeah.
boundary or whatever. You learn from situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. My sister's a 9 too, and hers is very much withdrawing. Like, there's kind of this running joke about how she's like such a poor communicator in my family. And when I got her coaching companion back, I was like, you're not a poor communicator. You go into your,
Avoidant.
yeah,
Mhm.
you go into your own space when you're stressed out. That's always been super fascinating to me with her too. Like now that she's learning through her number and what it means for conflict specifically, she can get super emotional because I'm trying, she's like, I don't like conflict. I'm aware of that. I'm a 9. Actually, this weekend, she's like, I'm a fucking 9. Like, she's on the phone with me complaining. And she's like, but if I'm gonna have conflict, I just need something productive to come out of it. Like, I need a plan. Like, if that's what's happened, which speaks to the anxiety piece of it, right? It's like you can't have something that just sits where, okay, so even if we move through it, then the thing with her will be like, well, what if it comes up again? And then she gets anxious. So that's funny. Yeah.
Which
I'm a
is
fucking 9. Like on the
and it's so interesting on the plan because nines are in the like action and gut triad. So it's not the same as a 6 wanting a plan, right? But it's more what are we going to do about it? Yeah.
Yeah, like what's the new, how are we operating with this now is more of the
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. What about a 1?
Well, when you think about when the strategy of perfectionism doesn't work for a 1, I mean, first of all, when that isn't working, of course, they're going to be super hard on themselves. We talked about before, right? Every number, but ones have a very mean inner critic. And so I think that probably comes first. Oh, this trying to make it perfect didn't work. So then it's the inner critic who's now telling you all the reasons why it wasn't perfect, why what you thought was going to be perfect wasn't, and beating themselves up and all that. And we know
Yeah.
that that strategy isn't actually helpful long term. It might help somebody get really good at a specific skill, but in the long run, like it's not not a healthy way to live with the inner critic
No.
that's like that. So I think about it too. Can the 1 look at it and learn to be enough? Do you know what I mean? It's the same as what's the uncomfortable thing? Is the uncomfortable thing letting something be imperfect? Or is the actual uncomfortable thing letting yourself be human? You're not a robot. You're a human
Yeah.
being, and it's okay. Nobody's perfect. And how
Yeah.
I don't have much 1 energy in my profile compared to some people, but I wonder if that's like the harder thing, is the acceptance of that you're human and you will never be perfect.
Yeah. I mean, my acts like a 1 is it's all the inner critic things that we've been talking about. I even mentioned it like with my number as a
Yeah.
2, but for me, it shows up not necessarily in an anticipation of a need, but in anticipation of a task, in an anticipation of at what level of perfectionism something needs to be done, right? So if I'm failing at something, or if I make a mistake and it's a silly mistake, or if, I mean, God, I've got a laundry basket over there that's been sitting there for 2 weeks with clothes that need to be put away. And I beat myself up about the dumbest shit like that, like just dumb. And it's like, oh, I've been busy doing a million other things. So, like, a laundry basket of folded clothes, is it the worst thing in the world? Probably not. But when it comes to the really big stuff, it's really hard to shut that inner critic down. It's it's really hard. I think about it in like physical appearance after having 2 kids, and being super hard on myself about that. And it's kind of this acceptance of like, I'm normal and I only have so much time in a day. And these are the things that I'm focusing on right now. And that's a mindset shift that has had to happen for me. I'm still working through a lot of that. But I think it's just taking a minute to exhale and not be like so rigid on like, well, if I'm not going to do that, then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this thing perfect. And I'm going to just, it's an exhale is the best way that I can describe it. Of I'm going to let it all fall. I'm going to let it sit because I'm a person and it's not serving me right now. And it's probably unhealthy for me to obsess about
Right.
it.
I think the inner critic for every, I shouldn't say everybody has an inner critic. There are people who don't actually have that, which is wild to me. But the negative critical self-talk, the self-judgment, it doesn't it doesn't serve in the long run. And so I do think every number, the self-judgment comes in when your type is failing you. A big part of the work is to give yourself the compassion that you would give someone else. Yeah. I'm just thinking about sixes a little bit as I say that, because I recently had a conversation with a six who was sharing that they've been through some pretty difficult stuff in their personal life recently. And just sort of this not wanting to tell anyone, but at the same time, then being kind of upset because people weren't reaching out, but nobody knew, right? So it was like this, and like the inner critic in her brain, right, was like, well, I need this person to reach out, but I didn't tell them. But I didn't tell them this was going on with me, so I can't really be mad at them. But I'm mad at them, but I can't, like, you know what I mean? And like this back and forth of like that sort of feeling, to the point of like reading minds, and then also sort of this judgment of others coming from a place of, well, if this is how I would show up for someone else who was in a similar situation. But I think about that, this is in this particular case, it's a situation that they could never be prepared for. And how that's like triggering all of that in that six energy and space for them. And that's like how that's showing up.
I have a close 6 in my life that has had a lot happen over the last year that was very unexpected and very scary. And again, one of those things that you could never be prepared for. And she is getting a lot better about reaching out to be like, I need someone to talk to about this. But there have been things that have happened that I had no idea. And I'm like, dude, you don't need to hold all that by yourself. Like, you gotta let some other people take on some of the burden of the feelings, and it at a minimum just hold some space for you to vent and talk about and let you cry, laugh, yell, whatever, like have whatever reaction without any sort of judgment or trying to fix it for you. That's the other thing with a 6, because they're not really looking for someone to fix it for them. But what would it look like if you just let it out before it became so heavy, and just kind of let somebody in to what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and talk about why it's unfair or whatever thing is going on, but sharing it to be able to give the visibility, because people can't read your mind. And as human beings, we're selfish. Like everybody has their own like needs, wants, desires, thoughts, priorities, and it's not a fair expectation to think about, oh, well, that person should just know, or why haven't they reached out to me? But through so many people that obviously care, just let somebody else hold on to it for a little bit.
I think it can be hard for every number in their own way to let people in. And I know tonight we're going to run out of time. We're not going to get to all 9 numbers in terms of examples of how type fails. So I think this is an opportunity to be like, maybe there's an element of self-reflection for anybody who's listening to sort of sit with it on their own and think about when whatever the strategy is that they typically employ to get what they need out from the world isn't working. But this idea around like asking for what you need just feels like a big theme through what we've talked about so far. It shows up for me in terms of withdrawing. It's showing up for you in terms of like giving, 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 and like not having anything else to give and needing somebody to be like, hey, maybe you don't have to be like that, right? We talked about it just now with the 6. So, yeah, I think that feels like a bit of a theme that's emerging from
Mhm.
this.
Yeah, just sharing what you need. If there's any sort of, to your point, reflection about what might be the uncomfortable thing or the thing that doesn't feel supernatural to do, there's a reason why that's probably jumping out as not comfortable, and maybe some thought around how you tap into some of those strategies when nothing else is working.
Yeah. And sometimes
Be-
it's being different than how you normally would be, and that's what makes it so uncomfortable.
well, yeah, it's not safe. It's not predictable, right? The example I
Well,
shared earlier, that wasn't predictable. I
yeah,
couldn't, avoid or try to manipulate the situation to make it easier for myself, but to just say, you know, in no uncertain terms, like, this is what's going to happen. And I need you to understand that, and draw, like, just being really clear, because I even gave examples in that I didn't even have yet. Like, we didn't have kids at that point. And I was like, I'm not doing 2 birthday parties someday. Like, that's not happening.
right.
And sometimes and my heart was like through my chest when I was doing that, right? The physical feeling that can give is very uncomfortable, even outside of the emotional feeling. But the end result was better than I could have expected, right?
Right.
And they're not all going to end up that way. But if there is a moment of reflection to be like, okay, well, this is what I would normally do. How could I do that different?
Yeah. Well, and to the discomfort, like the thing that we're all worried about in these situations that are emotional and uncomfortable like that is rejection, right? Like, I think it's a deep, it's a, it's a deep part of the human experience. If you think about, you know, thousands of years ago, or maybe even hundreds of years ago, when it was very much a tribal society. And if you were kicked out of the tribe that you were a part of, that could very well mean starving and dying, or being eaten by a predator, or, so there's some of that we are still, the need for connection, desire to like stay safe and not say the hard thing and whatever, is all built out of this fear of loss of the other person or the relationship, or right, like that's like, I think that's a big part of why there is like physical discomfort that comes up. Like, it's like wired into us.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
We think we're so evolved, right?
Right.
But we're fighting against these like basic systems all the time.
Right. I think there's a little flavor and ego in everything that we talk about on this podcast. If you really look back at all of our episodes, and this isn't, any different than that. So as we talk about the work that's associated with and the discomfort, it's challenging the basic systems that you've got wired into your brain, to your earlier point about however many years ago that system created. But the ego is there to protect us from that loss, the discomfort, all of the things that you just mentioned. So it's just, if you want a simple 3 words to attach to it, like, ego is part of it, not all of it. Part of it is just like basic human needs and something that makes us scared as a result, right? But I would just call that out too.
Yeah. There is everything. Like, I mean, if we want to distill even the Enneagram itself down, like, these are all the types are essentially egos. It's different kinds of egos. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we all range from unhealthy to healthy within that space. And
Yeah.
that feels like a whole conversation for another podcast.
I mean, say less. Any closing thoughts or reminders for everybody that's listening?
I would just say, to the point we made at the beginning, you can find content from us on all the major social platforms. If you find anything that we talk about beneficial, we would love for you to share it with a friend, share it with a family member, someone you think might benefit from learning a little bit more about the Enneagram, about themselves, about you. It could be a good conversation starter for people who are getting to know each other as well. Yeah, and we just really appreciate everybody who keeps showing up on YouTube, on the podcast platforms. This doesn't, well, it probably would still exist. Tannah and I would probably record this every week and release it with 0 listeners. But it makes it better when we get to have interaction and conversation with people who are listening.
We love it. We love it. We appreciate you all, and share, like, subscribe, chat, look at our social content. Most of it's there to either be really thought-provoking or make you laugh, as seen in our most recent dog content on our socials. At that point, I needed a creative release. I don't remember what I messaged you, something like that. I was like, I need to, I can't record right now. Yeah. Yeah. I can't record right now, but I'm actually making a post because I need an outlet.
Yeah. So we'll go check that out. We did Enneagram as dog breeds. Although I got feedback from one person that the 5 should have just been a cat.
Which is hilarious and so accurate. It is
hilarious. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
But go read them. Hopefully you find them funny, and yeah.
All right. Thanks, Holly.
All right. Yeah. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.